It's 1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. On the phone with me, Dennis McNally, his latest book, Jerry on Jerry, the unpublished Jerry Garcia interviews. Dennis, as you went back through these tapes, was there a surprise moment that you had forgotten about, it was like discovering something brand new again?
There were little details. The one that was well, there are a number of mind-boggling moments for me, that he worked for Lenny Bruce.
Yes, and that's a great story.
Yeah, no, it's a marvelous story, and he said that to me, and I went, what? And he said, well, yeah, I transcribed for him. And my response, my jaw was dropping, and my response at the time was, you mean you know how to type? And he said, no, I never learned how to type. I said, okay, that makes more sense, thank you. He said, no, I did it by hand, and somebody else had to type it up. The reason it was, Lenny was, getting arrested a lot for obscenity, and the cops would have somebody, a court reporter or whatever, go to to the show, to the club, and transcribe his work quite badly. And Jerry, however, had been listening at that point when he was hired. He had been listening to old time music, very fuzzy old 78s, and so he had an ear. And of course, that was the real job requirement, was being able to understand what Lenny was saying. And it turned into lessons in how you use language, and which in my interview actually led to a very wholly interesting another side tangent, which was all the stuff about Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, he's talking about language. Let's see, and it occurred to me, let's see, who else has he ever dealt with that really knows something about language? And I said, was there anything like that with Hunter? And off he charged, and great. It's great stuff, and that's also there that's the editing. They're separated and they're in different places, but it's all there.
It's 1450 KMMS, 1340 KPRK. On the phone with me, Dennis McNally. His latest book is Jerry on Jerry, the unpublished Jerry Garcia interviews. The thing that surprised me the most was Jerry Garcia was a huge fan of film.
Oh, from the beginning.
Yes.
He toward the end of his life, I didn't bother him with interviews because we didn't, it wasn't as though we had to do them, and he obviously didn't want to particularly be bothered. But one day I got a phone call from the American Movie Channel, and they did a show called The Movie That Changed My Life. It was a half-an-hour interview program. And I thought, this is something he'd really like. And I went, he was playing at the Warfield with the Garcia band, and I stopped by, I stopped by the dressing room, and I said, maybe this would interest you. And he immediately did the interview with me. He immediately started telling me at length why this movie, which was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, was so important to him. I mean, details, remarkable details. It was hysterical. So we ended up doing the interview. But in the book, there's this marvelous stuff about close encounters, because he really loved thinking about UFOs. I'm not suggesting he didn't necessarily believe in them. He keeps saying, they're probably much more likely to be local, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
He would talk about that. He talked about various other, the way. Oh God, I'm pulling a blank on the movie Blow Up. About how Blow Up sort of represented the '60s to him on a lot of levels, stylistically, and et cetera. Et cetera. So yes, he made movies. He was the Grateful Dead movie he directed it effectively after the fact. The shooters shot because it was live, and Jerry was a little busy at the time playing. But after the fact, he made that movie. It was his vision of the Grateful Dead. So yeah, the film was really very important to him.
With Jerry on Jerry, the unpublished Jerry Garcia interviews, do you view it as a companion piece to your previous book on Highway 61, Music, Race, and the Evolution of Cultural Freedom?
Well, just in the sense that on Highway 61 is the background. So I started out with Kerouac in the 50s, and then I did Grateful Dead in the 60s. And when I got finished with that, I said, well, gee, you're a historian. Why don't you go back and do the run-up to all that? It's the deep background, which is to say the origins of rock and roll. And when, for instance, he's talking about being a kid in San Francisco in the early 50s, when he's like 12, say in 1954, and he's listening to this song G by the Crows, and he immediately starts, like humming the basic opening riff and stuff. That's absolutely, they're fundamentally connected, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. There is the influence of black music on white musicians, and he's a textbook case. On Highway 61, somebody asked me, well, could you have done the Grateful Dead? The last third of it is about Dylan,
mm-hmm.
and how he connects with that tradition. And somebody said, well, why didn't you do the Grateful Dead? Could you have done the Grateful Dead in that slot? And I said, well, I could have, in the sense that they were reacting to the same influences, absolutely. I didn't, because I've already done the Grateful Dead, and nobody needs to hear me on the Grateful Dead again. That's why this book is okay, because you're not really hearing from me; you're hearing from him. So that's okay. That he's always useful to listen to. But the answer is yes. They're very much connected.
Jerry on Jerry, the unpublished Jerry Garcia interviews edited by Dennis McNally, is in your favorite local bookstores, or you can find them in your online retailers. As always, Dennis, I appreciate your time, and thank you for what you do in the literary world.
You're entirely welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you.